Hello everyone and welcome to Student Housing Unlocked, Multi-Housing News' podcast series that delves into investment, strategies, operations, and different approaches in the student housing sector. I'm Olivia Bunescu, Senior Associate Editor, and for this episode of our series, I'm joined by Josh Kassing, Senior Vice President at Cook Associates, to unpack what's next in student housing design. What do students actually use, need, and notice? We dig into the trends shaping campuses right now, how his team designs for a new generation of residents, the firm's spec furniture line created with Morgan Lee, and the biggest challenges and misconceptions in the space. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Pleasure to be here. We appreciate it. Thanks.
Today we'll discuss a bit about student housing design and Mary Cook Associates' approach to student housing design and some of your projects.
Perfect.
So, can you start by sharing your journey at Mary Cook Associates and what drew you to specialize in design, specifically student housing?
Yeah, of course. So I've been at MCA about 8 years now. I originally started as the creative director and then I've grown with the company as we've grown, which has been significant in that amount of time. We've grown a lot as our clients have too in that time and as the industry has. Our ethos and our history has always been rooted in working for owners and developers of real estate. And so we react to the needs of that industry, of that market, and we've always done that. And so in the last 8 years, that's included student housing, amongst other things, a multifamily, still continuing in some of the production builder work in terms of amenitized clubhouses, model homes, model units. But really the student portion has taken off dramatically in the time that I've been at Mary Cook Associates, and it's been exciting to be a part of. It's a complex industry segment, but it's really fun for me. I love watching it evolve, and I think that evolution curve is steep right now. I think we've made a lot of progress, not just at MCA, but as a world, as an industry in that time. And it was needed. It was needed in the student world. I think people underestimated the influence that student housing can have on so many things. And so it was sort of a perfect alignment for us. Some of our existing clients actually brought us into the student world. They asked us to do what we do for them in their multifamily portfolio. They said, could you just take that same process and same approach and utilize it except for student? And so of course we did, and we did a lot of work to figure out how to not change, but modify slightly that process and approach to work for student, because it is slightly different. There's different parameters and things, but what was exciting for us is that our clients saw the value of that process and approach and came to us to help elevate the student side of what we do. And that's what we've done. So, it's been an exciting time.
So you briefly mentioned that some of your existing clients actually got into the student housing space. Considering that you do work in other asset types, what makes student housing so different when it comes to design, and what are some unique challenges it presents?
Well, we're always learning. I don't think there's a solution. I think that understanding student takes a lot of work. It's a job to figure out how to navigate that, especially as an interior design partner. And we don't just do interior design, right? I would consider us the design choreographer in that we have our hands in a lot of the areas of design. Although we're conventionally contracted for interiors, it's so much more than that. We're crafting the experience alongside the other consultants and helping develop that approach with our clients. I think there's a couple challenges that are maybe different from multifamily. I think multifamily evolves at a slower pace than student does. I think because student is such a specific segment of humans, of people, we have a lot of really specific data to target the needs of that base. It's different from multifamily, which needs it most of the time warrants a little more flexibility, where in student it's very rapid, it's very fast. The timing of the projects and the timing of that student body is constantly parameter. It's constantly something we need to be looking back to, and that is more challenging. We can't just move the installation or opening of a project by 3 months in student. We can't afford to not understand exactly how students live, because every university has its own culture, its own experience, and we need to make sure our design solutions are responding to that. And they change quickly. A student base can shift cultural norms within a couple years, and some of these developments are 4, 5, 6, 7 years long. long from when we start to when they open. And so it requires a constant eye and a constant ear, looking and listening for things that might allow us or require us to change our approach. I think our clients get excited by that journey. I think when we first started, it was almost a little scary. We work for developers, right? And developers love a good precedent. And I do too, but I also know that in student, you need to always be looking forward, and that requires a higher risk threshold. And so I think when we first started, there was more hesitation. And now that those risks have been taken to evolve this industry, they're seeing the benefit of that. And they're seeing the power of staying ahead of that game. And that's exciting for me to see. In conventional multifamily, they've always seen the value of powerful design, powerful, intentional programming and operational backing to those programs. I don't know that that's always existed in student. In fact, I know it hasn't, because we're often called in to fix that. And I see the industry growing in that way. And I think our clients have evolved to understand that value. And you know what? Student is right up there with multifamily and pushing limits and boundaries right now, if not surpassing it in certain areas. And I think that's great.
And if you had to identify three major trends that are
Yeah.
influencing student housing right now, what would those trends be?
Sure. This is an interesting question. I often do speaking engagements on trends, and I always preface it with this, which is that a trend is not something that Josh wakes up in the morning and says, I like blue, so we're doing blue in all of our projects, and because it's cool or it's hip or it's new, right? Trends are a reaction to some sort of condition, whether that be physical, whether that be financial, whether that be demographic or psychographically driven. And so I don't just make these up, right? So trends are, people expect me to have this magical universal solution of trends that are design related. I'm going to challenge that. And the trends I'll mention are actually not design at all. Design is what we use. That's our tool to solve for a trend condition. So there are three major ones. I think there's more, but I'll talk about three that are specific to student. One, we can't talk about student without talking about wellness and mental health, right? But that's a huge umbrella. And there's so much to tackle there. There are so many nuances, segments of that. I will say that the trend I'm seeing that I'm very excited about is a more intentional approach to addressing those problems by subcategorizing that, right? It's not a green wall. It's not something that, putting plants in the lobby is, oh, now we're wellness focused, or having a yoga room is now this. No, it's not. That's a checkbox. That's a shallow surface level response. If you want to address mental health and wellness at a core level, it's an entire matrix of interactions that are required to do that holistically. We could do an entire podcast just on that. What I'll say is, there is an awareness of that matrix now, and our clients in this industry are attacking it from large scale and small scale. We're doing it in the power we have, which is providing the correct vessels, the correct experience to help make sure those interactions in that matrix actually happen. But it requires the partnership with our collaborators as well, which leads me into the second trend, which is an emphasis on the operational requirements of the designed experience for our students. It is not checkboxes anymore. And we all talk about this. Long gone are the days of, okay, we have a rock climbing wall and a luxury pool and a, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't really matter, right? Those things are great. What really matters, you could say the same thing about restaurants. We have drinks, we have food, we have music. Okay, fine. But what makes the difference is how you pair the operational components to that, right? So when you make sure that the people operating and responsible for the success of how those things, those programs are actually executed in real life, that's becoming the critical merger where what we design actually works the way it should. And so the trend is that people are putting emphasis on that. They're actually spending time to ensure that there's the operational infrastructure to support the vessels we're doing. That's been a challenge. And there's many times saying, yeah, nobody uses that space. Yeah, nobody does those things. I will challenge that with them and say, I don't think it's the space, guys. The space, the vessel, the thing is very well equipped, but it is not enough to open the doors and say, okay, go use it. In what experiential thing in life does that ever work? We're going to send you on a whitewater rafting trip with no guide. Here's the boat, here's the life jackets. Well, no one got in the river. Well, of course, right? You can't. And so finally, we're realizing, or the industry is realizing, that there is a really important merger there. And I'm seeing an investment in that from an operational standpoint, which I love to see. The third one is maybe the most abstract trend, but I'm going to call it the unseen experience,
All right.
which is we have focused on student so much for so long on sort of that bullet point list I mentioned. What are the things? How are we going to make it work? What do we sell when we do the tour, right? How do we sell the parents on all of those things? All of them are very important. They're all important. I'm going to push this industry and us to push it one step further and talk about what happens in between. Because if you look at the student experience, there's a lot of time that it's not formalized as I'm doing this thing. It's different than, let's say, a millennial in the workforce who has a 9 to 5. You have, the TikTok trend, the 6 to 9 before my 9 to 6. I love that. It's different with student in that there's gaps and there's in between space and there's downtime. And we talk about the importance of mental health and experience and making sure all the spaces and units we design are maximized. A trend I'm seeing, but I need to see more of, is looking at the in-between time. Looking at what happens in the downtime. Looking at what happens when there's not an event, there's not class, and how can we maximize that experience for our students to grow them into the best people they can be. I'm interested to see how that evolves. I've seen it's surface level happening. I want to keep pushing that.
That sounds very interesting. It's definitely worth exploring,
Yeah.
at least even from our perspective as journalists. So,
Yeah, of
yeah.
course.
You mentioned briefly millennials. I was wondering, considering that there is this new generation of students, the Gen Z students, how do they differ from previous generations when it comes to where and how they want to live?
Sure. So there's two things here. We can talk about Gen Z, which, yes, is the current student population. I almost think it's more beneficial, though, to talk about them in the context of Gen Alpha, the next generation after them. Here's why. The projects we're working on right now that we're engaging in and actively designing and actively problem solving for, they're opening in 2030, 2031, and beyond, meaning we're fully into Gen Alpha at that point. So frankly, if we're talking about Gen Z right now, it's not really beneficial because all those projects are well underway. They're opening and they are what they are, right? From a design standpoint, they were designed long ago and they're open. Now, Gen Z there's similarities between Gen Alpha and Let's talk about the most important things that came out of the Gen Z openings, things that we've seen open and Gen Z are actively living in. We know they're fiscally responsible. They care about their money. They care about where it's going. They care about their education. They care about getting that degree for the degree and having a job. When we're talking Gen Alpha, amp that up even more, especially when it comes to the value of education. That they're really asking the questions about what am I getting out of this, and I'm here to learn, not to have the college experience that I had, which was very much about the social scene and the quintessential college experience. A little bit different with design majors. We had a pretty high pressure scenario, but in general, that was the impression. I think that millennials were, and still are, very seduced by flashy experiences, flashy things. They love the idea of a good time, whatever that means for them. Gen Z and Gen A following them are far more critical of that. They're not seduced by the simple social media post. They see right through it. So what it means to be an authentic experience, a genuine experience for them, they're more critical. And we've learned that. They have a much more critical eye. They have a stronger tie to brands and quality than millennials did. and do. And so that absolutely plays a factor into the design. They're not sold by the simple. They want the thoughtful experience, and they'll see right through it if you don't give it to them. And so that's something in all the interactions we need to be very conscious of, because they're smart. They're smart, and they've been fed even more digital information than we have as millennials. And so they're good at spotting BS. They're good at spotting the untrue. And that goes all the way down to physical space. They know quality, they know what's going to work, they know when they see something like, yeah, we're never going to go in there. They're not going to romanticize it in their head like maybe millennials did. And so that's been an interesting thing. I mean, there's so much we could get into about demographic data, but those are some of the key points that I find the most interesting that I think we're carrying forward to our Gen A work, with all this next cycle of work going. And they're going to be a critical one to see, to see how this evolution continues in student.
All right. Can you expand a bit on the projects you recently worked on, the ones you mentioned that are going to come out for Gen Alpha, and also what makes them stand out and, offer that experience?
Yeah, sure. I'll start by saying there is never a one size fits all solution to student housing. There are so many factors that go into how and why we do what we do and how we get there. We've worked in everything from 40-story high rises outside of Miami to garden style apartments in South Bend for Notre Dame, and everything in between. It's an interesting thing, but I'll come back to the most important thing is the foundational work that we do, which is asking the how and the why, understanding your student deeply, understanding the university deeply, doing the work on the front end to create a position that allows you to make smart design decisions. If you look at MCA's portfolio of student work, it is vastly different from university to university, not only in terms of scale and approach, but in terms of design aesthetic, in terms of programming. Just because a cold plunge pool worked really well at one university does not mean it will work well. We're very fortunate to be working in a lot of different markets. So like I mentioned, Notre Dame, we have University of Central Florida that just opened last month. That's in Orlando. We had Lapis, which opened in Miami. We have projects at Texas A&M, University of Maryland, North Carolina State, Northern Arizona University, Clemson. So we're all over the board, and all of those require a really in-depth dive into understanding where the students are coming from, what they value, what their parents value, who are very influential in their decisions. But I will also say that our portfolio is essentially exclusively off-campus, purpose-built student. So we are not doing on-campus housing, which is a different approach than some of the on-campus things. It does allow us the flexibility to sort of morph and really uniquely identify and position our projects. What are we doing that no one else is? Why would someone choose to live here versus somewhere else? And how do we consistently raise the bar in those markets? That's what we're doing. There's nothing more powerful than when we're on a photo shoot and a student comes up and they go, "Are you guys the designer on the projects?" And usually we lie just because otherwise they'll ask us to design their apartment or something. But so every once in a while we'll be like, "Yeah, we are." And they're like, "Oh, I've never been prouder to live at this community." Or, I invite all my friends here. This is the place to be. This is where everyone wants to hang out. This is where everybody spends their time. That's the biggest reward for us. I mean, I can show you all the flashy photography from our portfolio and all the great work we're doing, all the great clients. It's all amazing. But I'll tell you, the most powerful thing is hearing from the students and how it changes their lives, because it means that design is doing more than being a pretty photo. It means it's doing more than being a sales tool for the website. It is those things. For sure, no question, but it can do more if you do it right, and that's what I'm proud of. So the portfolio is reflecting that, and it's ramping up increasingly. We started with a fairly small client base, getting large now, which is really exciting. So we're excited to see that growth.
And would you say that uniqueness is also translating the university's identity into your projects?
That's a tricky question to answer. Here's why. With the off-campus housing, like we talked about, a lot of times it's specifically not affiliated with the university for a lot of reasons. And so there is a sensitivity there for sure. But I will say this, what never gets lost is the cultural basis of the university. Why did students choose to go there? What makes those students special? That's what we use more so than the logo or the colors or something like that. In fact, a lot of the projects we get called to fix, or when we clients, what didn't we love last time you did one? It oftentimes is too direct of a correlation to the university. I think a lot of times smaller, maybe less strategic design firms think, oh, their colors are maroon and gold, so our design is going to be all maroon and gold. When you talk to students, that's the last thing they want. They have it all day on campus. That's their whole, that's everything related to sports, all of their university buildings, all of their collegiate buildings. So when you're talking about their home, they want a home, right? We all have sports teams we love. We all have allegiances we love, but it's a room in our house. It's not the kitchen and the dining room and the living room and the bedroom. And students feel the same way. We're crafting a home for them. And so there are instances where we are asked to work with the university in terms of positioning, but again, it's not aesthetic in nature. It's experiential and cultural, and that's actually more fun for us to find a design solution for than to just take things about the logo or colors. We might in certain areas. I'll give you an example. At the 87, which is in South Bend at Notre Dame, we did the All-Pro Lounge, which was a specific Notre Dame focused feature area, which was all about the ultimate space to watch the game. There's a huge following when it comes to Notre Dame alumni, and so we wanted to create a space for them, specific for that thing. So of course that has all the Notre Dame paraphernalia, but it's not the whole space. It's a specific designated area, and the rest of the area has responded to the unique brand we designed for people going to Notre Dame. So it sort of hits both points there.
I think it's also, I've seen working in student housing and writing stories. Yeah. I've also seen a lot of flashy interiors, as we call them, which kind of, I feel like they don't leave space for students to find their identity while they're, experiencing college. So I do guess that a design that allows them the flexibility to transform the space into their home certainly is more appropriate for at least the Gen Z students that are now, inhabiting those spaces.
Yeah, and I mean, we see this all the time, which is those signature looks or styles, right? You hire a designer because they have a look and they take that and they impose it on that space and they outfit it accordingly, completely disregarding how a student might live. And so that's the antithesis of who we are. That's the antithesis of what we do, which is it's not about us at all. In fact, I say this at design meetings all the time. None of us at this table, folks, have to like this. No one here has to like it. Who has to like it is the student, is the persona of who's living here. That's who has to appreciate it and be able to craft their experience, to your point, around what they need, how they need out of their college experience, not what we are. That it makes no sense. So yeah, 100%.
I'd like to move a bit into the Built-to-spec furniture line that you launched in April this year with Morgan Lee, which seems to be a very exciting development. I want to know what inspired this collaboration and how does it change the way developers think about furnishing student housing?
That's a great question. So, like any business venture, we look for unresolved items, things that are, I don't want to say a problem, but haven't been fully resolved. And having done student now for almost a decade, we see a lot of product. An interesting thing happened for our whole team when we would go view the competitors or even the comps, right, of just the not necessarily the competitors, but like who we consider base level product within each of our communities or areas we're working in. It was interesting how we see these amenity spaces that have evolved, like we talked about, significantly in the last decade. They're really upping their game and becoming very impressive. And we would walk into the units and it was always like, okay, it was always a letdown, and a lot of times felt like a complete departure from the rest of the community. It felt like a back of house space, a break room or something that no one had considered, when in fact, this is the area students are spending the majority of their time, more than amenity spaces, more than leasing and management. How has there not been thought to how these areas work? Even beyond that, there was what we called the catalog effect, which was, okay, we have all of these units. Now we need to go shopping for furniture. It was always left out of the design team scope, and the development partner or the ownership group or whoever it was would go shopping. and they would pick for things. There's a few things there. One, respectfully, that's not their thing. That's not their lane. And as such, they're not confident in those decisions because they don't know how to evaluate furniture as it relates to three-dimensional space. That's what we do. We're really good at that. So that's like issue one to resolve. Issue two is that the context of the unit was not always considered, right? I'm not saying that what's in the catalog was bad. What I'm saying is that desk may not work for the unit configuration of the unit layouts we have for this university, and now you're ordering 800 of them. That's a problem, right? Because if you can't pull the desk chair out without hitting your bed or your dresser, you can't sit at your desk. So the desk alone isn't design. Design is how you pair all these factors and parameters to create a solution that makes sense. And so that's critical. And that's where the built to spec started coming from, which is let's stop shopping. Let's stop doing that. Let's design something that's rooted in the position we established for the rest of the amenity areas. We take that position, we craft something no one's done before. So remove the catalog. If we do it here, no one else is doing it and no one else has done it. So it is unique to this university, just like we would do with the amenities and the brand. And then we will vet to ensure that that design solution actually works the best it possibly can for those unit layouts, which means breaking the status quo. We just had a project where we opened Built-to-spec at Aperture at University of Central Florida. The units were not deep enough to have a dresser at the end of the bed. It was not wide enough to have nightstands. And so what did we do? We thickened the headboard to act as a nightstand size, as well as a sort of make your own component for artwork behind it so students could make unique their spaces. There was a lot of reasons for doing that. But if you would have selected a conventional, well, we usually get a dresser and a this and a that, and well, it wouldn't have worked in that space, but it took doing the work, laying it out to understand it. Most of all, it's not more expensive. It's the same cost, if not less. So it's not a cost thing. There is time to do the work, but we've got plenty of time in student. So let's do the work, do it right. The second part of this whole thing was partnering with a group that was able to deliver on the promises we make as MCA, which is excellence, thought leadership, consistency, on time, on budget, all of those things. And so we interviewed a number of partners, and we've been asked to do this for a number of partners and ultimately selected Morgan Lee as the right partner for this venture. They're here in Chicago, which is amazing for coordination, but they have manufacturing abilities globally, and so they're able to lean on domestic capabilities for projects that warrant it, overseas production for those that warrant it there, and you mesh those two together, and we've had a very successful collaboration there. So I'm very proud to say, for the first time walking through UCF, the units finally felt just as impressive as the rest of the community, which is not easy to do.
That sounds great. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And besides the one size fits all and the catalog problem you see in student housing, what are some other issues or misconceptions developers or designers have about student housing?
Good question. I'm going to work strategy and then go to design. We always say here that good design is not about spending the most money. It is about understanding how to spend those dollars. And one misconception, I think, in the development side of student housing is that by sharing the budget, they're showing all of their cards. And that cannot be less true. If we have a clear understanding of the budgetary objectives, we can design to any budget without losing the impact or sort of quality you get from a variety of design intent objectives, right? And so that's a very common misconception that, remember, this is student. We don't have an unlimited budget. Of course, we never have an unlimited budget, no matter what we're doing in development. There's a clear budget. And so I would encourage our clients, our collaborators, our consultants, that sharing budgetary parameters is not showing your cards at all. It helps us make better decisions in a time when every dollar counts. Getting these projects to pencil is the biggest hurdle. And so don't withhold those from us, share them with us, and we can design better accordingly. That's a very common one. Two, we have to talk about durability and suitability, in that students can be rough on these spaces we design for them. And there is a minimum investment in the things we put in, both in terms of furniture and furnishings, but as well as the hard materials. We need bleach cleanability, constant mopping, constant sweeping, especially in northern universities with snow and salt and all those things. I can't tell you how much time we spend convincing the team to make the right decision about investing in the right materials and design solutions. It's not an expense, it is an investment, and it will come back to bite you very quickly. We've seen it time and time again. Just do it right the first time. I will also say, in the hospitality world, for a long time, there's been enforcement around the durability and suitability requirements for public space. There are minimums that you legally have to have for public space. In student and in multifamily, we've sort of gotten away with it for a while. We've had 3 projects in the last 90 days where the fire marshal has required all flame-proof certifications for any upholstery located in these properties. I'm saying this because you can't just go to Target and buy things. You can't go to Wayfair and say, oh, I like this table because it's too expensive. You literally can't. You have to prove this is public space. It warrants a certain caliber. And now it's being legally reinforced, which as a designer makes me so happy. Because code compliancy does it for a reason. We don't want to overspend, but we do want to invest in the right things to ensure these students are safe and that the way we outfit the space can warrant multiple rounds of students coming through and using these effectively. We want them to be proud of their space, and it requires an investment. So that's sort of a misconception / solution, but we're sort of there. The third thing I would say is that color is the solution. I can't tell you how many times I hear clients, we need more color. We need more color. We need more color. We will get to color, right? But these students are very smart. They have high level of taste. They're very mature for their age. They don't want a playground. And frankly, the people sitting in the room making those directives are not 18, 19, 20 years old. And they expect, and there's a few developers out there who are really understanding this and they're doing it to the level it should be. That's another misconception, is that lack of color equals poor design. That could not be more true. Color is a critical element to design, but let us handle that. Let the designers compose how and where that should go, because it is very challenging when we're up against decision makers who think that color is the solution, just because for 30 years in student housing it was. That's changed very rapidly. Not to say we're not using color. We use color all the time. But the way we design color in 3D space versus a t-shirt or a brochure or a hat, they're very different. Different outputs. What a painter will use in their oil painting is not the same paint we use to paint a wall, and that's intentional. We craft spaces for 3D experiences. So that's a sort of misconception and maybe critique I'm still pushing with us. I think we still need to up the formality game, and we need to understand these students are looking for a very holistic experience. They're looking for one that's thought through.
I finished my master's degree 3 years ago, but while I was studying, I used to live in the dorm.
Yep.
And we were 5 people in the same room, and I guess that the people leading the dorm design or whatever they were doing, they thought color is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So for the first year of my college, I had to live in a room that was painted in the ugliest yellow.
Mm-hmm.
I love yellow. It's one of my favorite colors, but it was so bright. And then the next year in college, I lived in a peachy room.
Mm-hmm.
So oh my God, that was
and they think they're doing something right. And I think part of it is just understanding, let your design professionals do their job and engage us, because it is, sure, you're sort of dictating how those people feel all the time with that one choice. And it's not a good approach for holistic, long-lasting design.
That's true. I'd like to go a bit deeper in some of Mary Cook Associates' strategies. And you have this return to environment philosophy. Mm-hmm. How does that concept translate specifically to student housing?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So I'm a little bit of a history lesson first. So Mary Cook, our founder and president, she wrote a book called The Art of Space, and it was rooted in a framework to, when you do these 7 things right, what we call the 7 fundamentals, things happen. Return on investment is what happens. It's the net result of getting those things right. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of things that happen. People, will spend more for real estate. They'll bring more friends. They'll stay longer. They'll enjoy their time more. It happens innately. You'll see it, especially if you're with a group of friends and they go, oh, we just love that restaurant. They can't really articulate why they love it. It just sort of happens. It's not singular in nature. It's always a combination of things. And so the seven fundamentals are that matrix. They are that combination of things that lead to return on environment. In the student world, it is so heavily rooted in community. It's so heavily rooted in this is the first home away from home for many students. This is the first time they're away from their family, their friends. They'll make new friends, of course, but we need to help get them there, and we need to help create that sense of community that maybe is lacking just by providing a vessel. We can provide a building. That's not a community. That's just a building. That's just a bunch of walls and windows. And so our job is to dig a lot deeper. And so the return on environment that happens, it happens twofold. One, we work for owners and developers of real estate. So there's very pragmatic things. We opened on time, which is a huge thing. We made the turn, we got everything in, students are moving in. Two, the project is profitable. It penciled. We're getting the rents we wanted. We're leasing. We have at UCF at Aperture, we were 100% leased prior to, I think, 4 months prior to opening. It was a record for them. That's a return on environment too, right? So there's ROE that happens on the pragmatic side, and then there's the sort of experiential side, which is what do we do for students with all the community things we talked about. I do want to talk about the parents' reaction to that community. There is nothing that makes parents feel better when they know their kids are safe, included, when they are part of something, and working towards their future self. Our spaces help do all of that for them. We're very conscious of how our buildings are operated from a safety and security standpoint. That makes our parents feel good. That's ROE. When they can sleep well at night, that's a return. That's something a lot of people don't talk about. When they know that within a week of living somewhere, they just happened to bump into their new group of best friends. They didn't just happen to do that. It was crafted for them. It was quite literally curated to make sure that happened. I would say our ROE is that we pump those numbers up, and that chance gets really high, because we've created a space that allows them to do that and be their authentic selves. ROE means a lot of things. Specific to student, I think, for me personally, it'd be interesting to ask everyone in the office working on these projects what they would consider. For me, it's that every day they're living and experiencing our spaces, they are contributing to their future self. That they are growing and building in a way maybe that they didn't even know they could, because of what we crafted with the rest of the team. That's the biggest ROE to me in student, because we're shaping quite literally the trajectory for their life. And that's a big deal. I take great pride in that. I also take it very seriously and take a lot of accountability for that too. So, yeah.
That's beautifully said.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you. Besides Gen Alpha being more experience-centric, what do you think will define the next wave of student housing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first, we got to get the real estate cycle to ramp up a little bit, because right now the focus is so on getting things to pencil and getting them done and in, right? This is a challenging question for me to answer, because right now I understand that the hurdles in front of us are not probably long-term, but they are impacting the work we've been doing and are doing for the last couple of years. And so the focus is a little bit different. Let's say that the costs come down and economy is really where we all want it to be, and even better, let's say. Then what I think is going to adjust this next cycle is, and I hate to say this, but I really need to say it, which is we need to ditch precedent of student housing. I think we need a clean slate wipe of how this has been done for a long time and really, really triage it. Look at what the actual problems are and solve for those problems. I think we have a lot of work to do on how units are laid out, configured, done, made. Look to Europe. Look how housing has been done for so long there, and understand how you can still subdivide communal living in a way that's effective. It's just not the way we've done it forever. I also think as part of the clean slate mentality, we need to look at the way that we are getting our data about how students live. I am very skeptical when someone comes to me and says, I sat down with the students and this is what they told me. I think we need more observation and more reading between the lines to figure out what they actually need. Because I think they're saying what they want, what's going to make them sound good, and what they're going to say sounds like what the leader of that conversation wants to hear. I don't think we're reading between the lines enough. And I think if you actually observe an event, not asking students, how was the event that was hosted by your building, but instead just watching. We need to deepen the psychology, as we did in multifamily and continue to do. I'm not saying it's not happening. I guess I'm requesting a cleaner wipe of that slate to really understand the problems at hand, because I think some of them are a little vanilla, they're a little diluted. And I think that we almost need to read between the lines more so that our answers and developments are not looking backwards, but looking forward. And they're really, really responding to those, because I think this industry has done a great job of solving for a lot of existing problems. That means that the problems we're now solving are becoming more complex, and they're becoming more nuanced, and they're deeper, and they're more layered. And so with that style problem comes more layered, complex nuances, responses. And there's a lot of great organizations and coalitions working on this. I guess where I see it going is taking that data, really digging in, doing a bit of a clean sweep, right? Not ditching everything we've done, but really just looking at what are the problems at hand, because I think they will be different. I think we will see the collegiate and university experience change dramatically for a lot of reasons. I think people are questioning for the first time in a long time whether the college experience is for them, more so than I've seen in a long time, which means that decision making is changing, which means that our solutions have to change. And it's really exciting. I think it's a great point. I was talking earlier about how we're in that really steep evolution. When it starts to plateau, which I think it will soon, we need the next curve. We got to dig in again. The work isn't done. There's a whole new group of people coming in with a whole new collegiate experience. And I guess another part I'll say as part of this new thing is looking at how the student experience post-COVID has changed in terms of going to more virtual platforms, and how to ensure that spaces we're crafting and creating respond effectively to the advances in technology. Everyone is talking AI, I know, we got it, but it is dramatically changing how we operate day to day. Dramatically. And so if we aren't looking at, and I guess that's why I'm encouraging this sort of clean slate, like I don't even know that textbooks will be around in 5 years. And frankly, I don't know that they should. Like it might not make sense. And so that offers all these different things. Think about okay, you eliminate certain things like that and everything moves to a different piece of technology with a different software implication. It's like when the internet arrived. What we did for the college experience when the internet came out was transformative. We're at that same point right now, and it's moving very quickly. And so I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you exactly what the next trend is going to be, but I will say that I think those who succeed in this next round with Gen A will be the ones that took some risks on understanding that this experience will be different, drastically different. And the ones that solve for it quickly and effectively will come out on top. And so I'm excited to see who does that. I think I'm sure pushing everybody here to be part of that swing. And we have a ton of investment right now in innovation and AI. We have a whole team designated, a whole studio just for looking at these things for this exact reason. Because we need to understand those who utilize the tools best will come out on top. And I think that the students will ultimately benefit from it.
I actually find your perspective very refreshing. Discussing with people about student housing, which is seen like this asset type that is so resilient against everything. Sometimes these conversations can be a bit linear. And when I hear refreshing perspectives, I love to dig deeper into them. So I'm so sad that we can have a 2-hour conversation, but
Yeah.
maybe I'll contact you for
Anytime.
another article on what
Anytime.
we something to scratch from student housing.
Yes,
And
100%.
how to
Would love to.
adapt.
That's
That
my
would be
goal, on these, and it is resilient. It proved it during COVID. That student was a very resilient market sector. But if you know anything about me, I'm always pushing for the next thing. And I love to learn and I love to absorb. And what I'm observing right now is that it's very exciting to keep the momentum going. And the resiliency is great. I'm going to push us to be resilient and better and more thoughtful and more intentional as we go. And you can have both. You can have both, and they can level, and then they sort of one up each other every time. And I love that. I think that's exciting about the world we live in.
Yeah, that's right. Josh, thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank
It was a
you.
pleasure talking to you.
You as well.
Thank you for listening to Student Housing Unlocked. Make sure to tune in for the next episode of our series. For more news, trend stories, and podcast episodes, visit multihousingnews.com. Moreover, don't hesitate to join MHN's Executive Council. Every month, we discuss the latest trends and topics with leading experts in the field, and your input could be extremely helpful. To join, please send an email to jessicafir@cpe-mhn.com. Have a great day, and we can't wait to see you on our next episode.